So today, TroubleTRO, that's POVAR22 here on YouTube, POVAR22 here on YouTube, TroubleTRO released the final part of the science experiment collab story with MrInternetman. Now they did say, as I mentioned in a previous video, audio video that is, that basically they were going to have to hold off on the initial release, which they normally would do between the first Sunday and Monday of the week. They would have to hold off until later on. Now, they made the initial announcement that it'd probably be, around early next week. Well, they got done, I think, a lot sooner than expected, and this morning, about, I would say, 8 hours ago or so, they dropped the final and 20th part of Science Experiment. Now, they did say they were going to release the full PDF of the entire 20 parts, the entire comic, later on. So I do plan to basically download that, and if you're subscribed to TroubleTRO, or as you know them here on YouTube, POVAR22, then I would suggest also downloading the comic as well if you support them. But one thing they did mention in the description of the story, along with the story, is the possibility of a sequel. If we would like to see a sequel, a follow-up. And honestly, the way they left off the story and everything, with the dialogue that the ladies had between each other, and the fact that you have a lot of people in the comments section, including myself, basically saying, hey, we would have to be stupid and naive not to ask for a sequel or want to see a sequel. I think, a sequel is definitely one that, TroubleTRO should really consider, and probably already has in the planning stages, knowing we want to see it. But here's the thing. Even though they might have it in the planning stages, what ideas do they have, if any? Do they have any ideas, or could they maybe benefit from some suggestions, from people like myself and others that support them? Well, just in case they don't have anything concrete, if you will, in story, I do have a few suggestions and ideas for them, and if they're working on the sequel with MrInternetman, for both of them to consider and maybe look into for potential usage in the possible sequel, which some of these ideas could even lend itself to maybe giving them, the opportunity to do a third science experiment down the line. What do I mean by that? Well, hold on, and I'll tell you some of the ideas I have, suggestions that should be. Excuse me there. So the first suggestion and idea I have is that for 75% of the story, you need to put the emphasis on what these ladies have become very fond about, very, attractive to, very orgasmically enjoyment of, if you will. And that is the fact you have to focus on the liquid, melty gooiness, that they're basically, getting an arousal and so hot off of and everything now, since they have the powers to do so. You got to put emphasis on that. I mean, the fact that you have them hinting and talking about the fact that this experiment has just begun, they got a lot more exploring to do, I mean, to me, that just opens the door not only for a potential sequel, which I'm pretty sure we're going to be getting, but it opens up the door for all kinds of mischievous, sexual, intimate, possibilities between these two characters. I mean, the fact that the scientist who became the black latex drone made of liquid, if you will, basically ran into a pillar to turn back into liquid, thus allowing herself to utilize it to turn into a car and everything. To me, you really have an opportunity to explore a lot more with this. You really do. I mean, think about it. once they find the destination, or once they get to their destination, you can have them basically, become liquid again and experiment of what they can turn into by being just liquid. Like, okay, what could be the next step? What could they do next and stuff? But also you can have them get intimate with each other, of course. Kind of like mixed together, where the end result would be like, you're walking into a room and it's flooded with a bunch of liquid, but the liquid is a mixture of red and black. You could do that. You could do that, especially if maybe TroubleTRO and MrInternetman are going to go the route that they did for the epilogue sequel of Agent Pink, Bedlam's Revenge. Because in that epilogue, if you will, it was mostly focused on the two characters getting intimate, using their shape-shifting powers to do so, and thus ending up as nothing but gooey, slimy, puddles of whatever, liquid, tentacles, if you will, and then the friend joining in later on. So if Science Experiment 2 is going to be similar to that with these two characters, then you got to go that route, but take it up a notch to the upteenth degree, if you know what I mean. So to me, you really got to put focus on them having all this kind of mischievous exploration, fun and intimacy, sexualness and all that with the powers where they melt down, when they melt into puddles, they mix together, they use the liquid form as just, pure puddles of liquid to shapeshift into anything or anyone or any animal that they choose to be, for fun or sexual purposes or whatever. I mean, you need to really, for 75% of the story, go all out with these two and their powers. You need to go all out, basically. You need to get as crazy and inventive and innovative, if you will, when it comes to these characters and the powers. You need to do that. You need to go that route. Because again, you've set the standard. You set the standard, in my opinion, of the fact that the now primary focus, is being nothing more than liquid. Being nothing more than, liquid drones that could take on a human shape, but preferably just want to remain as nothing but puddles of goo. And then shapeshift, through that process. So you need to use 75% of the story to really just go all out in that scenario. And I think anybody watching that supports TroubleTRO or POVAR22 here on YouTube, anybody that supports their work along with MrInternetman would be in agreement. They would be in agreement. And Trouble, if you and MrInternetman are listening to this, I think you would agree. I think you would agree that that's what fans are expecting from you. That for 75% of the story, that basically what I've mentioned should be the primary focus. It should be. But why am I saying 75%? What about the other 25%? Well, that's where things get interesting. You see, I understand we just can't focus on the girls having mischievous, arousing, intimate, sexual, gooey, melty, liquidy fun. I understand that. You also have to have a bit of a story to tie into it. And to me, that's where the company, that they were working for comes into play. You see, I think the company here should, play a part. And their part could lead to an even bigger part in a potential third science experiment story. Yeah, like the second one, primarily can focus on the girls having fun and doing everything that I mentioned, and that's 25% that focuses on the company and the people there could help lend itself to the bigger plot point that could build towards a third science experiment one, or story I should say, that could be 50-50. And the reason I say that, again, is you can have the company, the higher-ups there, check the security cameras, the recordings, see what happened, and then make it their mission to basically, ladies and gentlemen, basically track the ladies down, try to capture them, and maybe find a way to extract the power out of them, and and basically try to contain it because they believe it belongs to them and no one else. And to me, by having 25% of the story focus on them wanting to plan that out, by planning that out, you open the door for the third science experiment story to be made, where now it's 50-50. 50% of the plot on the girls, 50% of the plot on the company. That comes together, and off to the races you go. Off to the races you go. So to me, I think that 25% of the story should focus on the company, not only discovering what happened, but then wanting to track these ladies down to try to get that power back because they believe it rightfully belongs to them and no one else. And to me, like I said, that could lead to something bigger down the road if they choose to go that route. But what would make it fun and everything and interesting and kind of intertwining both, the 75% which would be focused on the ladies and the 25% focused on them, what would kind of help it intertwine just a bit, and more so in a potential third science experiment story, is basically the girls' powers will be evolving so much through the explorations and everything, their fun and all that, the sexual activity, stuff like that, that it'll make it hard for the company to track them down because basically, they won't know exactly where to not only look, basically, but they won't be able to know exactly what they could be or who they could be because of the fact that, they have these powers that'll be hard to detect. And that makes things a little interesting interesting for a potential third story. But what would be the one thing that would kind of intertwine these two together? That would be a big payoff in the following sequel that could lead us into a third sequel, with these ladies, and make things a lot more, I guess you could say, intriguing and open-dooredness, if you will, for a third story. What could be the one thing? What could be that one thing? Well, I think we all know what it is because anybody that followed the story, this initial science experiment story, kind of thought it was heading this way. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case, but maybe now the sequel will fill that gap, and along with that 25% of the story that I mentioned, intertwining with the majority of the story, which is 75% of the girls just having fun, I think we all know what could be the answer to really make things more intriguing, potentially, for a third story. And that would be fusion. That's right. You see, a lot of us initially thought there was going to be a fusion in this first one, but that wasn't the case. However, that doesn't mean that in the sequel we will not see one. And I think we will. Because like I said at the beginning, you have these girls have mischievous fun, being nothing but liquid, getting sexually intimate with each other, mixing together, becoming like a pond of black and red liquid on a ground floor or something or whatever. But then you have them do one more experiment. You have them decide to get really close and see what will happen, and pretty much knowing what will happen, go for it, and the end result is you get a fusion. You get a fusion, and depending on the direction you go with, you get the birth of a new character. Whether the character is pretty much controlled, by both ladies who would both mentally be there, in the head of the new character, or you have a melding of both characters to where the minds join together into a new mind, and this is the birth of a new character that knows where they came from and realizes the opportunity that lies ahead of them and everything, but also could be the one that pretty much figures out, the company that the two ladies that formed to be me, is on the lookout, for them. They know what happened. So she can have that knowledge And by being that fusion, that merger of the two ladies could basically pass that knowledge on to them, because the minds being merged together, so that when they do separate, they'll get the idea of, okay, we need to figure out how to make sure we don't get caught. And then you can have them, decide, on what the next step would be, which would lead us into a third science experiment story. But again, that all depends on if they go this route for the sequel, and I think they should. So to me, fusion has to be, in my opinion, fusion has to be the last step in the sequel that could potentially lead us into a third story. Because again, you intertwine all the pieces together, which will give us a full-fledged story, 50-50, if you will, from both, from both halves of the third story, coming together, if you will, trying to find the right words to say. But yeah, to me, fusion is the obvious, next step of the experimenting and all that. And again, it could lead them into setting the tone for a potential third story, because now not only are you intertwining the 75% where they're having that sexual, intimate fun and all that with the powers and everything that results in them trying one more step, which is fusion, but it also intertwines that 25%, that we kind of go back and forth with the story, with the company trying to figure out how to, get their hands on these ladies, bring them back, extract the power out of them and all that. And, by intertwining it together, especially at the end, you basically leave that off on a cliffhanger, just like you did with this one, and then off to the races you go with the third one, and pretty much that will, I guess you could say, write itself, because now you'll have a better idea, a better, pretty much perspective of where you want to go with a third science experiment story. But yeah, I think honestly, fusion should be one of the last things that we see in the story, in the sequel, that could help lead us into a third sequel. Yeah, so overall, I should say, those are just my suggestions and ideas for the potential Science Experiment 2 story by TroubleTRO, POVR22 here on YouTube, and MrInternetman. Those are just my suggestions and ideas. If you guys want to go with them, that's fine. More power to you. If not, and you already have stuff planned out, can't wait to see what you bring to the table down the line when you follow up on this. But let me know what your thoughts are. For those of you listening here on YouTube, and those that might be listening here on YouTube via a link I provide in the comment section on Patreon and stuff, let me know what your thoughts are. Do you agree with some of the ideas? Let me know down below in the comments, or in the live chat during the premiere. And until next time, talk to y'all later.